The garage smelled like oil rust and desperation, not the kind of desperation you read about in books clean and poetic. This was the real kind, the kind that sits in your chest like a stone and tells you quietly every single morning that today might be the day you don't make it. Leo Gallagher had been living inside that desperation for 26 days. He knew the exact number because he scratched a line into the concrete wall every morning when he woke up. It was something his father had taught him: keep counting, son. As long as you are counting, you're still here. His father had said that from a hospital bed 3 years before he died, with IVs running into both arms and grease still under his fingernails that the nurses couldn't quite scrub away. Leo still had grease under his fingernails too. It was one of the only things he had left. The garage was abandoned, had been for years from the looks of it. Perched at the edge of a 2-lane highway somewhere between Tucson and nowhere. It had probably been a gas station once, maybe a mechanic's shop. Now it was just 4 walls, a broken roof, and enough shade to keep a runaway alive if he was careful. Leo had found it by accident 3 weeks ago when he'd been running so hard from Hank Dawson's truck that his lungs felt like they were being wrung out like wet rags. He'd stumbled through the side door, collapsed onto the concrete floor, and hadn't left since. Leaving meant being found, and being found meant going back. He would rather die in the desert than go back. He had 4 bottles of water left. He'd rationed them down to a careful system: 2 swallows in the morning, 2 at noon, 2 at night. His stomach had stopped growling 2 days ago, which he knew from the first aid book he'd found in the garage's back cabinet wasn't actually a good sign. When your body stops asking for food, it means it's given up asking. Don't give up, he told himself. Keep counting. He was sitting cross-legged on the floor that afternoon, turning a carburetor over in his hands. Not because he needed to fix anything, just because it was something to do. Something familiar. Something that made his father feel close when he heard it. A sound so low and so enormous, it seemed to come from the earth itself. He froze. He knew that sound. Every American kid knew that sound. It was the sound of a Harley-Davidson engine, a big one, a V-twin, probably a 90s Softail or a Road King, doing exactly what those engines do when something has gone badly wrong. It wasn't a roar anymore. It was a cough, a lurch, the mechanical equivalent of a man clutching his chest and going down to one knee. Then it died. Complete silence. And then outside a voice. Son of a crash, metal on asphalt, something heavy hitting the ground. Leo didn't move. He pressed himself back against the wall carburetor, still in his hands, and told himself to breathe. Don't move. Don't make a sound. It's probably nobody. It's nobody. It'll go away. A pause. Come on! The voice was enormous, not just loud enormous, the way a thunderstorm is enormous, the kind of sound that has weight to it. It rattled the loose sheet metal on the garage roof. Leo's hands were trembling. Don't move. Piece of 20 years I've ridden this bike. 20 years. You pick now to die on me. Another crash, the sound of a helmet hitting pavement, and then silence again. A long, terrible silence. And then slow and deliberate, the sound of boots on gravel, getting closer. Leo's breath went completely still in his chest. The footsteps stopped just outside the garage door. A shadow fell across the cracked window, and then a fist hit the door so hard the whole frame shook. Anybody in there? Leo didn't answer. I can see your footprints in the dirt. A pause. And the door's been oiled recently. Somebody's been taking care of this place. Another pause. I'm not a cop. I'm not going to hurt you. I just need to know if there's any water. Leo's eyes went to the 4 bottles lined up against the wall. 4 bottles. 4. He closed his eyes. He thought about his father. His father who used to say, there are 2 kinds of people in the world, Leo. The ones who help and the ones who don't. You already know which kind you want to be. He stood up. He walked to the door. He opened it. The man standing on the other side of that door was not quite human. That was Leo's first thought, and it hit him like a slap. He wasn't just big, he was built the way mountains are built, as if the world had simply decided that this particular arrangement of mass and bone needed to exist, and had put it together without asking anyone's permission. He had to be 6'3", maybe 6'4", with forearms that looked like they'd been carved out of old hardwood. His beard was gray and black, thick as brush, and his eyes were the color of weathered denim blue. Very still watching Leo, with an intensity that made Leo feel like something being appraised. He was wearing full leathers. The back of his cut read Hell's Angels. Phoenix. Leo didn't run. He was too tired to run. You got water, the man said. Some, Leo said. I'll pay you for it. I don't want money. The man studied him. His eyes moved from Leo's face to the wrench in his hand to the carburetor on the floor behind him. He didn't say anything for a moment. Men like this, Leo would learn, were always measuring things, calculating distances, risks, what something was worth. I'm Jack Sullivan, the man said finally. People call me Sully. Leo. You got a last name, Leo. Everybody's got a last name. Sully almost smiled, not quite. Fair enough. He looked past Leo into the garage. His eyes settled on the tools spread across the floor, the engine parts arranged in careful rows. You a mechanic? My dad was. Your dad here? No. Something shifted in Sully's expression. He didn't push it. My bike's dead, he said. I don't know what happened. She was running fine and then she just went. I've got 40 miles to the nearest town and my phone's been out of signal for the last 20. I've got people expecting me. He paused. People who are going to come looking if I don't show up. Leo heard the weight behind those last words. He filed it away. Let me look at it, Leo said. You sure about that? I'm not sure about anything, Leo said honestly. But I can look at it. Siam. The bike was a 1994 Harley-Davidson Road King, and she was one of the most beautiful machines Leo had ever seen. Even lying on her side in the dirt, Sully had dropped the kickstand on a loose patch of gravel, and the whole thing had gone over. She had a presence to her. 1,800 pounds of American iron, custom chrome, everywhere, the gas tank painted in a deep, almost blood red that caught the afternoon light and seemed to hold it. Leo walked around her slowly, not touching, yet just looking. His father had taught him that first. A good mechanic looks before he touches. The machine's already telling you what's wrong. You just have to learn how to listen. Sully stood back and watched. She coughed before she went, Leo asked. Yeah, maybe half a mile back. Rough idle before that, in the last few days. Sully thought about it. Yeah, actually, I figured it was the altitude. Leo crouched down beside the engine. It's not the altitude, he pointed. See this? This is your petcock, the fuel valve. It controls flow from the tank to the carb. The reserve diaphragms failed. She's been slowly starving since you left Phoenix, and when the main fuel ran down to nothing, she just quit. Sully stared at him. You got that from looking at it. My dad used to say engines talk if you know the language. Leo stood up. The part's replaceable, but I don't have an exact fit. I might be able to fabricate something that'll get you where you need to go. Not permanent, but functional. How long am I? Hour, maybe less if I'm lucky. Sully was quiet for a long moment. He was looking at Leo the way people look at something that doesn't quite add up, not with suspicion, exactly more with the discomfort of a puzzle that's missing a piece. How old are you? He finally said. 18, Leo said. Sully's eyes didn't move. How old are you really? A beat. 17. Where are your parents? Us. Dad's dead. Don't know my mom. I've been in foster care since I was 9. Where's your foster family? Leo looked at him steadily. I don't have one anymore. Sully absorbed this. His jaw worked slightly like he was chewing on what he was about to say and deciding whether to say it. How long you been out here? Long enough. Leo. 26 days. The silence that followed that number was different from the silences before it. Heavier. Sully looked at the garage. He looked at the water bottles visible through the open door. He looked at Leo, at the hollows under his eyes, the way his shirt hung off his shoulders, the careful stillness with which he held himself like a person who'd learned to take up as little space as possible. Get your tools, Sully said quietly. Let's fix my bike. They worked in silence at first. Leo had learned the language of silence from his father too. A good silence between two people working on an engine is its own kind of conversation. It's the sound of two minds focused on the same problem, the same rhythm. His father used to say, you could tell everything about a man by how he handed you a tool, whether he slapped it in your palm like he was doing you a favor, or whether he placed it handle first careful, like he understood that the tool mattered. Sully placed tools handle first. Leo noticed that. He'd pulled what he needed from the scattered parts around the garage, a length of fuel line that wasn't quite right, but was close enough, a brass fitting from an old lawnmower carburetor, a clamp he had had to reshape with needle-nose pliers. He worked fast fingers moving from memory more than thought, and he was aware of Sully watching him the whole time. Not hovering, just watching from a respectful distance, the way you watch someone do something they're genuinely good at. "Your dad teach you all this?" Sully asked. The first words either of them had spoken in 20 minutes. "Yeah." Leo didn't look up from what he was doing. He had a shop in Flagstaff. Nothing fancy, just a garage, basically. He worked on bikes, mostly some cars. People would bring him things that other mechanics had given up on. Leo paused. He liked the lost causes. "Sounds like a good man." "He was the best man I ever knew." A beat. "He died of cancer when I was 14. Pancreatic, moved fast." Another beat. 6 weeks from diagnosis to yeah. Sully didn't offer condolences. Leo was glad. He'd had 3 years of condolences, and they'd never made the hole any smaller. "After that, they put you in foster care?" Sully asked. "Couple of different placements first. Then I ended up with Hank Dawson." Leo's voice changed on that name very slightly, a tightening like a door being bolted. "In Tucson." Sully heard the change. He didn't comment on it right away. He waited. "Hank Dawson," he said eventually. "Yeah. What did Hank Dawson do to you?" Leo's hands kept moving. The brass fitting slid into place. He reached for the clamp. "What didn't he do is a shorter list." "Leo, I'm fine." "I'm not asking if you're fine. I'm asking what he did." Leo looked up then. He looked at Sully directly the way he hadn't let himself look at anyone in a long time, and something in his chest was pulling taut like a wire. "Why does it matter?" "Because I'm asking," Sully said simply, "and because you're a kid who's been living alone in a desert garage for 26 days, and whoever drove you out here, that matters. That matters to me." Leo studied him for a long, long moment. "He hit me," Leo said, "a lot. And when he wasn't hitting me, he was making sure I understood that I was nothing that I'd always be, nothing that my dad was nothing to, and the only reason anybody kept me around was for the state check." His voice was completely flat now. Flat, the way things go flat when you've pressed all the feeling out of them. 3 weeks ago, he came home and he was real drunk and he had his belt and he said he was going to teach me a lesson about gratitude. Leo paused. "I ran. I've been running since." Silence. Leo went back to the fitting. "Is he looking for you?" Sully asked. "Probably. He gets paid per kid. He doesn't want me back because he cares. He wants me back because I'm money." Sully made a sound that wasn't quite a word. It was the kind of sound a man makes when he is keeping himself very carefully controlled. "You almost done," he said. 5 minutes. In those 5 minutes, Leo's hands moved with a focus that bordered on desperate. Not because he was afraid of Sully he wasn't anymore, or at least not in the same way. He was afraid of what it felt like to have told someone the truth. He'd been carrying that truth for 3 years, the truth about Hank, the truth about the belt and the names and the locked doors and the cold meals, and he'd kept it pressed down so small and so tight that it barely took up space. And now he'd said it out loud to a Hell's Angel in the Arizona desert, and it was just sitting there in the air between them, enormous and real. He finished the repair. He stood up. "Try it," he said. Sully righted the bike with practiced ease. The man made it look like he was picking up a bicycle, swung his leg over, and kicked the starter. She caught on the first try. The sound she made was extraordinary. A deep rolling thunder that vibrated in Leo's sternum, alive and powerful and entirely unapologetically itself. The Road King's engine settled into her idle like a woman settling into her favorite chair, comfortable, certain home. Sully sat on the running bike for a moment with his eyes closed. Then he opened them and looked at Leo. "You saved my life," he said. "It's just a petcock valve," Leo said. "That's not what I mean." Leo didn't know what to say to that. "I was supposed to be in Phoenix by tonight," Sully said. 247 of my brothers are waiting on me. We've got business," he paused. "Important business. And if I don't show, they come looking." Another pause. "They always come looking." Leo nodded slowly. "Okay. I want you to come with me." Leo went very still. "To Phoenix," Sully said. "You can ride on the back. We'll get you food, water, a real bed. Tomorrow we figure out the rest. But tonight..." He looked at Leo directly. Tonight you're not sleeping in a desert garage by yourself. Not after what you just told me. Leo's jaw tightened. I know you don't need it. Sully's voice was careful, patient, immovable. I'm not offering because you need it. I'm offering because you earned it. Because you fixed my bike when you didn't have to, and because my father taught me that a debt is a debt, and I don't ride away from my debts. I don't know you, Leo said. You know enough, Sully said, or you wouldn't have opened that door. That landed somewhere in Leo's chest with a particular weight, because it was true. He had opened the door. He had looked at the shadow on the window, and the fist on the frame, and the enormous voice, and he had opened the door anyway, because his father had taught him what kind of person he wanted to be. I'll think about it, Leo said. Sully nodded, like he'd expected exactly that answer. Take your time. He kept the engine running. Leo stood in the garage door and looked at the desert, the highway shimmering in the heat, the sky turning colors above the distant mesas, the whole enormous, empty world sitting there like a question that didn't have an answer yet. And that was when he heard the sound. Not the Harley this time. A truck engine, American big block, coming fast from the east. And then Sully's phone suddenly finding signal, exploding with notifications, text after text after text, piling in, and over the engine noise, Leo could see the screen from where he stood, could see the name appearing over and over in the notification banners. Unknown, he's in Tucson area. Garage off Highway 77. Hank's already moving. Leo's blood went cold. He looked at Sully. Sully was reading his phone. His expression had not changed, but his eyes had those pale, weathered denim eyes had gone somewhere else entirely, somewhere dark and very calm. Leo, Sully said quietly. I hear it, Leo said. The truck engine was getting louder. Get in the garage, Sully said. Running doesn't... I'm not telling you to run. Sully's voice was perfectly steady. I'm telling you to get in the garage and let me handle this first conversation. Can you do that? Leo looked at the highway. The truck was visible now. A black F250 coming fast dust boiling up behind it. That's his truck, Leo said. His voice was completely flat. I know. There's going to be someone with him. He doesn't go anywhere without... I know. Sully swung off the bike. He stood to his full height, rolled his shoulders once slowly. He looked at the approaching truck the way a mountain looks at weather. Get in the garage, Leo, and whatever you hear, don't come out until I say. Leo's hands were shaking again. Sully, as though he said. The man looked at him. He's got a deputy with him, corrupt. They've done this before other kids who ran. The deputy files paperwork that makes it look legal, and Hank just... Leo's voice cracked once, very small, and he pressed it back down. He's done this before. Something moved across Sully's face, very fast, very deep. Get in the garage, Sully said quietly. And God help him, Leo did. Duh. He stood inside the garage door with the wrench still in his hand and listened to the truck pull off the highway onto the gravel, listened to the engine cut, listened to 2 doors open and 2 sets of boots hit the ground. And then he heard Hank Dawson's voice for the first time in 26 days. Where's the kid? Low flat, certain the voice of a man who had never in his life expected the answer to be anything other than what he wanted. And Sully's voice quiet and enormous. Excuse me? A pause. I said, where's the kid? I know he's here. I've got a legal guardian right and a deputy right here who's... I heard what you said. Sully's voice hadn't changed at all. It had the quality of stone. I'm asking you to excuse yourself because I don't think you introduced yourself before you started demanding things. Another pause, longer this time. Leo pressed himself against the wall. His heart was slamming. My name is Hank Dawson. Hank said slower now, like he was realizing something was different here. I'm the legal guardian of a minor named Leo Gallagher, and I have reason to believe Hank Dawson, Sully repeated. That's right. Silence. I've heard that name before, Sully said, and the way he said it, the absolute quiet certainty of it, like a door being locked from the inside, made Leo's skin go cold in a completely different way than it had before. He didn't know what Sully meant, but something in Hank Dawson's next pause told Leo that Hank didn't know either, and that not knowing had just frightened him for the first time. Look, Hank said, his voice shifting slightly, recalibrating. I'm not here for trouble. The kid ran away. He's a ward of the state. I have documentation. Deputy, Sully said. A pause. What? The deputy's voice younger, less certain. What's your name? A hesitation. Why, Bon? Because I want to know your name, Sully said. Just that. Just those 6 words delivered with the absolute patience of a man who had all the time in the world and meant every syllable. Inside the garage, Leo's fingers tightened around the wrench. Outside, nobody was speaking. The desert wind moved through the silence like it owned it. And somewhere in the distance, so faint it might have been imagined, Leo thought he heard something. A sound building at the edge of the world, low and rolling and coming from the west. Not one engine, many. No. Outside, Sully had reached into his jacket, not for a weapon, for his phone. And what he typed and who he sent it to and what that message said, that was something Leo wouldn't know until later. But he would remember for the rest of his life the exact moment he heard it, the exact moment the sound on the horizon went from a suggestion to a certainty, from a murmur to a roar, from something that might be coming to something that absolutely irreversibly was. 247 engines, all of them heading east, all of them heading here. And in the garage, holding a wrench with shaking hands, Leo Gallagher pressed his back against the wall and closed his eyes and thought for the first time in 26 days, maybe I'm going to be okay. Maybe. The sound was unmistakable now. It wasn't traffic. It wasn't thunder. It was something older than both a rolling, churning wall of noise that seemed to press against the air itself, getting louder, with every second eating up the distance between the horizon and the garage, with the kind of patience that only comes from knowing absolutely that you are going to arrive. Leo heard Hank go quiet outside. That silence, Hank Dawson going quiet, was something Leo had never heard before in 3 years of living under that man's roof. Hank was never quiet. Hank filled every room he walked into with his voice, his weight, his certainty that the world owed him something and that the people smaller than him were the currency he collected it with. The silence from outside hit Leo harder than the sound on the horizon did. He pressed his eye to the crack in the garage door. Hank was standing in the gravel with his arms slightly out from his sides, the way a man stands when he's trying to look bigger than he feels. He was heavy-set thick through the chest and neck, wearing the same worn Carhartt jacket Leo had seen him in 100 times. His face had gone the color of old concrete. The deputy beside him, young, maybe 25, with a khaki uniform and a badge that caught the afternoon light, was turning in a slow circle, trying to find the source of the sound with his eyes. Sully hadn't moved. He was standing in the same spot, weight-balanced, arms at his sides, watching Hank the way a man watches a problem he's already solved. His phone was back in his jacket. His face showed nothing. "That's," the deputy started. "Yeah," Sully said. He didn't look away from Hank. "How many?" "Enough," Sully said. Hank found his voice. It came back smaller than it had been roughed at the edges. "Listen, I don't want any trouble with whoever those are. I just want the boy. He's a minor. He ran away. That's a legal matter." He held up a hand like he was directing traffic. "This is between me and the law." Sully looked at the deputy. "You the law." The deputy didn't answer right away. His hand had moved toward his belt and then moved away again, like it couldn't decide what to do with itself. "Deputy," Sully said. His voice was the same as it had been since Hank's truck pulled up, patient, flat, enormous. "I asked you a question." Yes, Deputy Aaron Briggs, Pima County." "Deputy Briggs." Sully seemed to taste the name. "How long you been on the job?" "What is that?" "How long?" A pause. 2 years. 2 years, Sully nodded slowly. "You got family, Deputy Briggs?" The deputy blinked. "What? Wife, kids, parents somewhere?" "I don't see what that has to do with—" "I'm asking," Sully said, "because I want you to think about them right now. I want you to think about the people who need you to come home tonight, and I want you to ask yourself whether this," he gestured very slightly toward Hank, "is worth what happens next." Inside the garage, Leo's breath had stopped. The deputy had gone completely still, and then the sound hit them, not the distant rolling sound anymore, but something immediate and physical, a vibration that came up through the ground and into the bones of anyone standing on it. The first bikes crested the highway, rise a quarter-mile away, and there were so many of them that the front of the formation was already visible before the back had cleared the hill. 247 motorcycles. In formation. Leo had never seen anything like it. He didn't think anyone standing outside had either. Hank took one step backward, then stopped himself like the step had embarrassed him. This is, this is intimidation. This is Briggs, write this down. This is organized intimidation of a law enforcement. Hank, Sully said. The word landed like a stone dropped into still water. Hank stopped talking. Do you know what I do for a living? Sully asked. Hank swallowed. I don't know. I fix things, Sully said. That's what I've always done. Engines, situations. He paused. People. His eyes hadn't left Hank's face. I'm very good at it, and I'm patient. I've been patient my whole life because I learned a long time ago that patience is the most powerful thing a man can carry. Another pause. But I've also learned that patience has a number, a point at which it stops. He tilted his head slightly. I think you and I need to have a private conversation, Hank, while my brothers park their bikes. The front of the formation was pulling off the highway now. The noise was extraordinary, not just loud, but layered harmonic like a choir made of combustion engines, each bike's note weaving into the others until the whole thing became something that sat inside your chest and didn't leave. Deputy Briggs had not moved his hand back toward his belt. Leo watched Hank's face through the crack. He watched the man who had broken him recalculate, reassess, rebuild his bravado from scratch 3 times in 30 seconds and fail allow him 3 times. He watched the Carhartt jacket hang differently on those heavy shoulders. He watched Hank Dawson understand for maybe the first time in his life what it felt like to be the smallest person in the room. And God help him, Leo felt something he hadn't expected to feel. Not satisfaction, not triumph, pity. A cold, distant, exhausted pity, the kind you feel for a thing that has always been broken and never knew it. He pressed it down and looked away from the crack and stood in the middle of the garage with his wrench and his shaking hands and waited. Outside, the world was filling with engines, Sully's voice cutting through all of it. Hank, walk with me. A pause, then the sound of boots on gravel moving away from the garage. Leo exhaled. He slid down the wall until he was sitting on the concrete floor, knees up, wrench across his thighs, and he put his face in his hands for exactly 10 seconds. He counted them. 1 through 10, the way his father had taught him when things got bad. Give yourself 10 seconds to fall apart, son, and then you get back up. His father had been a practical man, a good man, a man who understood that strength wasn't the absence of falling apart. It was the decision to get back up after. Leo got back up. He moved to the other side of the garage, where there was a high, dirty window that faced the desert behind the building. He could hear Sully's voice lower now and Hank's in the steady rumble of bikes idling and cutting off one by one as 247 Hells Angels parked in a gravel lot and a highway shoulder that was never designed to hold them. And then he heard something that made him go very still. His name. Sully's voice carrying back on the desert wind. The boy's name is Leo Gallagher. He's 17 years old. His father was a mechanic. His father died when Leo was 14, and the state put him in your care. And a pause and something in the pause that Leo couldn't identify but felt. You want to tell me about that in your own words, Hank's voice defensive and shrinking. Whatever the kid told you, it's kids lie. Runaway kids especially, they build up these. I didn't ask you what he told me, Sully said. I asked you to tell me about it in your own words. Silence. Go ahead, Hank. Look, I disciplined the boy. I had every legal right. Discipline. Yes. With a belt. Longer silence. He was disrespectful. He had an attitude. You try raising a teenager who thinks the whole world owes him something because his daddy died. See how? Leo heard it then. Not Sully's voice, something else. A sound from the gravel lot. Not aggressive, not loud. Just a collective shift. The sound of 247 men who had all heard the same sentence at the same time and the silence that followed it. Hank heard it too. His voice changed completely. Listen, I'm willing to, we can work something out. If the boy needs a different placement, I can call the caseworker. You called the caseworker, Sully said. When Hank, before or after you picked up your belt? No answer. How many other kids have you had in your house? Sully asked. That's not relevant. How many, Hank? A pause. 7 over the years. 7 kids. Sully's voice hadn't changed. That was the thing that made it so terrible it never changed. 7 kids that the state handed to you because they didn't have anywhere else to go, because they were already broken from losing the people they loved, because they needed someone to hold them together. A beat, and you hit them. I disciplined. You hit them, Sully said, final, absolute. Inside the garage, Leo had his back to the wall again, both hands flat on the concrete behind him, breathing carefully. He had never in his life heard anyone say it that simply, without flinching, without qualification. Just the plain flat fact of it stated aloud in the desert sun. You hit them. 3 words. He felt something crack open in his chest, and he pressed his lips together hard and looked at the ceiling and counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. Outside Deputy Briggs' voice, younger now, uncertain in a different way than before. Mr. Sullivan, I want you to know that if there was misconduct in this case, there are proper channels. Deputy Briggs, Sully said, yes. Are you going to file that report? A pause. Yes, sir, I will. Are you going to do it today? Yes. And are you going to tell your supervisor that you drove out here with this man today, knowing what he was coming for? The longest pause yet. Yes, the deputy said, and his voice had something in it now. Something that might have been relief, the way a man sounds when he's been carrying something heavy and just set it down. Yet I am. Leo heard Sully say very quietly, good man, and then the sound of one pair of boots walking back toward the highway. The deputy's door opening, closing, an engine starting, tires on gravel. Deputy Briggs drove away. Leo let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding since he was 14 years old. Outside, it was just Sully and Hank and 247 silent witnesses to whatever was about to happen next. Hank's voice again, smaller now, reaching for something to grip. You can't keep me from the boy. Legally. He's my ward, and you've got no right. I'm going to say one thing, Sully said, and I need you to hear it completely, Hank, because I'm only going to say it once, please. Leo Gallagher is under my protection, starting right now. I don't care what papers you have. I don't care what the state says. I don't care what laws you think you can hide behind. Sully's voice was quieter than it had been all afternoon, and somehow that made it the loudest thing Leo had ever heard. If you come near that boy again, if you file paperwork, if you make a phone call, if you drive down a highway that he happens to be on, I will know. My brothers will know, and we will find you. A beat. Not to hurt you, Hank. That's not who we are. We will find you, and we will sit down, and we will talk about every child you have ever put your hands on, in front of every person whose opinion you care about, your neighbors, your coworkers, your church. Another beat. Everyone. Silence. Do you understand me? Sully asked. A long, terrible silence. Do you understand me, Hank? Yes, Hank said, barely audible. Good, Sully said. Now get in your truck and drive east. Don't stop until you're home. Don't call anyone on the way. Don't call your lawyer. Don't call your caseworker. Don't call anyone. Go home. Think about what I said. And tomorrow morning when you wake up, think about it again. The sound of heavy boots on gravel. A truck door. An engine. Hank's F-250 pulled back onto the highway and drove east, and the sound of it faded into the desert like it had never been. And for a moment, there was nothing, just the wind and the distant engines of 247 bikes that had all gone quiet, and the sky going gold above the mesas. Then Sully's voice at the garage door. Leo. Leo stood up. He walked to the door and opened it. Sully was standing there, and behind him, stretching back across the gravel lot and down the highway's shoulder as far as Leo could see, were the bikes. All of them. And the men on them are standing beside them or sitting on the ground. Big men, scarred men, bearded and tattooed and leather-clad, some of them old enough to be Leo's grandfather, some of them Leo's father's age. They were looking at him without expression, the way a jury looks at someone before they have decided anything yet. Leo looked back at them. You okay? Sully asked. I don't know, Leo said honestly. Sully nodded like that was the right answer. You hungry? Leo almost laughed. The sound that came out wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite a sob. It was something in between, something that had been stuck behind his sternum for 26 days and just ran out of room. Yeah, he said. Yeah, I'm hungry. Good. Sully put a hand briefly on Leo's shoulder, not grabbing, not gripping, just resting the way you put a hand on someone's shoulder when you want them to know they're not alone. It lasted maybe 2 seconds. Then he turned to the assembled crowd and said in a voice that carried everything, "Somebody find this kid some food." And the sound that came back, not a cheer exactly, but a collective exhale, a deep rumbling murmur of assent that moved through 247 men. Like a wave hit Leo somewhere so far down in his chest that it took him a moment to identify what it was. It was the sound of people deciding you belong. He hadn't heard that sound in 3 years. He stood in the doorway of the broken-down garage in the last light of a desert afternoon, and he felt it move through him, and he counted to 10, and this time he didn't need the counting to hold himself together. This time he just counted because he was still here. Someone handed Leo a sandwich. He didn't even see who. One moment his hands were empty, and the next there was a paper-wrapped sub in them thick with meat and cheese, and he stared at it for a second like he'd forgotten what food was. His stomach remembered before his brain did it, clenched hard, a physical demand, and he sat down on the front bumper of a truck somebody had pulled alongside the garage, and he ate. He ate the way you eat when you haven't eaten in 2 days, and before that had been surviving on gas station crackers and the last of a jar of peanut butter he'd found in the garage's back cabinet. He ate without looking up, without talking, and nobody bothered him. That was the thing he noticed first about these men. They understood when to leave a person alone. They moved around the lot in their own conversations, their own rhythms, boots on gravel, and the low percussion of 200 voices finding their separate levels. And they gave Leo his 10 feet of quiet like it was the most natural thing in the world. Sully sat on the bike beside him and drank black coffee from a thermos someone had produced from somewhere and watched the highway. "You eat like a man who hasn't in a while," Sully said. "2 days," Leo said through the last of the sandwich. "Before that, not great." Sully poured a second cup and handed it to Leo without asking. Leo took it. It was hot and bitter and the best thing he'd tasted in a month. "I need to ask you something," Sully said. Leo looked at him. "The deputy, Briggs." Sully turned the thermos in his hands. "He drove out here with Hank, knowing what Hank was. You said they had done this before. Other kids who ran." He paused. "Do you know the other names, the other kids?" Leo was quiet for a moment. "I knew one, Marcus. He was there before me. I found out about him from the caseworker when I first got placed. She let something slip. He ran too about a year before I did. I don't know where he went. Last name Torres, I think. Marcus Torres." Sully didn't write it down. He just nodded slowly in the way Leo was beginning to recognize the way this man stored information quietly without ceremony, the way he stored everything. "Anybody else?" "There was a girl before Marcus. I never got her name. The caseworker shut down when I asked." Leo looked at his hands around the cup. "I always wondered what happened to her." The silence between them held the weight of that. "We're going to find out," Sully said. "Not a promise, a statement of fact. The way you say, the sun will come up tomorrow." Leo looked at him. "Why? What do you mean, why? I mean..." Leo stopped, started again. "I mean, why does it matter to you? I fixed your bike. You owed me water, maybe a sandwich. You handled Hank. That's more than anyone has ever done for me. But you're talking about investigating a foster care system in Pima County, finding kids I barely knew the names of. Like, this is just a thing you do on a Tuesday afternoon," and he stopped again. "Why?" Sully was quiet for long enough that Leo thought maybe he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, "I was in the system." Leo went still. "Not foster care, different kind of system. Juvenile detention twice before I was 16. Sully didn't look at Leo while he said it. He looked at the highway. "Nobody came for me either. I got out because I got lucky, and I got lucky because one person decided I was worth the trouble." He paused. "His name was Ray Colton. He was a mechanic. He had a shop in Scottsdale. He was mean as hell, and he smelled like motor oil and cigarettes, and he was the best man I ever knew besides my own father." Another pause. "Sound familiar?" Leo didn't answer. He didn't need to. "Ray died 11 years ago," Sully said. "Stroke, came out of nowhere. I've thought about him every single day since." He finally looked at Leo. "You reminded me of something the second I saw you. the way you were holding that carburetor. Like it was something that mattered. Like you were taking care of it. His voice was completely level. Ray used to hold parts that way. Leo looked down at the coffee cup in his hands. I'm not Ray, Sully said. I know that. I'm not trying to be. But I'm a man who knows what a debt looks like, and I know what it looks like when someone needs a door opened. He paused. So that's why. Leo didn't say anything for a long time. The lawn around them was settling, bikes cooling, conversations, dropping in register the massive organism of 247 men beginning to organize itself for the next move. Leo could feel the shift in energy, the way momentum was gathering towards something, a direction being decided. What happens now? Leo asked. Now, Sully said, we have a conversation I should have had on the phone 2 hours ago. He stood, capped the thermos, and put 2 fingers in his mouth and whistled, sharp, cutting through every conversation in the lot like a blade through paper. Silence fell in about 4 seconds. 246 faces turned towards Sully. Sully didn't raise his voice. He never raised his voice. We're moving out in 30. Phoenix tonight. I need Reyes and Castro up front with me. Everyone else, standard formation. He paused. The boy rides with me. No discussion, no vote. Just a collective nod that moved through the crowd like a wave, and then the sound of 200 men returning to their preparations. Leo looked at Sully. They just do whatever you say. Sully picked up his helmet. They trust me. How did you earn that? Sully looked at him with something that might have been the beginning of a smile. Same way you earn anything, Leo. You show up. Every single time for 20 years you show up. Leo stood, and that was when he heard it. A phone ringing, not Sully's, coming from inside the garage. His own phone, the ancient, cracked screen prepaid he'd kept off for 26 days to avoid being traced, which he'd turned on for 30 seconds that morning to check the time and apparently hadn't fully powered down again. He knew before he looked at the screen who it was. But it wasn't Hank's number. It was a number he didn't recognize. Arizona area code. And when he answered it, because something in his gut told him to, the voice on the other end was young. Male. Careful. Is this Leo? Leo Gallagher? Leo's throat tightened. Who is this? My name is Marcus, the voice said. Marcus Torres. I think you knew my name. The world went sideways. Leo gripped the phone with both hands. How did you get this number? I've been monitoring Hank's communications for 8 months, Marcus said, fast and steady, like he'd practiced this. I set up a flag on his contacts when I found out he had a new kid. When he tried to run a trace on your phone this morning, it triggered my alert. A pause. I've been waiting for someone to run. Leo's voice came out barely above a whisper. How old are you? 19 now. I got out when I was 16. I've been building a case since I was 17. Marcus's voice had something in it, a tautness, a coiled precision like a wire under tension. Leo, I have documentation. I have records. 3 kids before me, you after me, and I've been cross-referencing with Deputy Briggs' patrol logs for 6 months. A pause. I can take this to the state. I can take it higher than the state. But I needed someone who was current, someone who just came out, because my testimony alone isn't enough. Leo stood in the garage doorway and felt the ground shift under him, not literally, but the way the ground shifts when the story you thought you were in turns out to be a much larger story than you knew. Sully had come up behind him. Leo hadn't heard him, but he felt him the way you feel a solid wall at your back. Speaker, Sully said quietly. Leo put it on speaker. Marcus, Sully said. My name is Jack Sullivan. I'm with Leo right now. Tell me about the documentation. A brief silence on the other end, Marcus recalibrating, factoring in a new variable. Then, who are you? Oh, someone who wants the same thing you want, Sully said. Go ahead. Another pause. Then Marcus deciding, I have medical records from 3 separate emergency room visits, all minors, all listed as accidents. I have Briggs's patrol log showing he responded to Hank's address 4 times in 2 years and filed no reports. I have financial records showing Hank collected state payments for kids he had already discharged without informing the agency. He paused. And I have a recording. The word dropped into the silence like a stone into deep water. Of what? Sully said. Of Hank and Briggs, on the phone 3 weeks ago, the day Leo ran. Marcus's voice was completely steady. Briggs tells Hank that if Leo files a complaint, there are ways to make it disappear. Hank says, and I'm quoting directly, he says, "The kid's got nobody. Nobody's going to listen to a nobody." A pause. "I've been nobody before. I know what it sounds like." Leo had to put his hand on the garage door frame. His knuckles went white. "Marcus," he said. His voice was steadier than he expected. "Where are you, Tempe? I've been in Tempe for 2 years. "How far is that from Phoenix?" Sully asked. 20 minutes. Sully looked at Leo. Leo looked at Sully. "Can you be in Phoenix tonight?" Sully asked. A silence. "Then yeah, I can." "I'm going to give you an address," Sully said. "Be there by 9. He recited it, a street in Phoenix Leo didn't know yet. "Bring everything. Hard copies, digital, all of it." He paused. "And Marcus." "Yeah. You did good, building that case for 2 years on your own." Sully's voice had the same quality it had had when he told the deputy he was a good man. Definitive. Real. That took courage. A long pause on the other end. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had cracked very slightly at the edges, just a hairline fracture, in the steadiness, like the one moment where the wire under tension shows what it's actually made of. "I just didn't want it to happen to the next one," he said. "I didn't want there to be a next one." "I know," Sully said. 9 o'clock. He took the phone off speaker and handed it back to Leo, and Leo stood there holding it, looking at nothing, and the garage was very quiet. "You okay?" Sully asked. Same question as before. Same patient, unhurried voice. "He had a recording this whole time," Leo said. "Yes. 2 years. He's been building a case for 2 years by himself at 17 years old because..." Leo stopped. His jaw was working. "Because nobody else was going to," Sully said. "Yeah. Now somebody is." Leo looked up at him in awe at him. "You have lawyers. I mean your club. Do you have..." "We have lawyers," Sully said with a dryness that almost constituted humor. "We have very good lawyers. Here's men in my position that tend to develop that resource over time." He picked up his helmet. "And I have a friend at the Arizona Republic who has been looking for a story worth telling for about a year." He paused. "I think he just found it." Leo felt something move through him, not the cold shock of Marcus's call or the hot adrenaline of Hank showing up, but something slower and more complicated. Something that felt like the first distant awareness that all of this, the 26 days, the garage, the wrench, and the broken petcock valve, and the 247 bikes was not the end of something. It was the beginning. He wasn't ready to hold that yet. It was too big. He folded it up and put it somewhere inside him and decided to take it out later when he had more room. "I need to get my stuff," he said. "What stuff?" Leo looked back into the garage. 4 water bottles, a first aid book, a rolled sleeping bag, a change of clothes in a backpack, a set of tools wrapped in an old cloth. Everything he owned in the world fitting into one arm. He gathered it in 30 seconds. When he came back out, Sully was on the bike. The 2 men Leo hadn't spoken to yet had positioned their bikes on either side Reyes and Castro. He assumed both built like they'd been assembled for difficult situations. They looked at Leo without hostility and without welcome. Just assessment, measuring. Leo looked back at them the same way. Reyes, darker, stocky, with a beard going silver at the jaw, nodded once, barely. The kind of nod that passes information between men without wasting a syllable. Leo nodded back. "You ever been on a motorcycle?" Sully asked. "My dad had a '78 Sportster," Leo said. "I rode on the back from the time I was 7 until he sold it when I was 12. He needed the money for..." He didn't finish the sentence. "I know how to hold on." "Hold on then," Sully said. Leo swung up behind him, settled his backpack, put both feet on the passenger pegs, remembered the geometry of it, lean with the bike. Don't fight the turns, let your body follow instead of resist. The engine came up under him, and then all around them, one by one, and then all at once, 246 other engines came up too, and the sound built from a rumble to a roar, to something that was no longer just sound, but a physical force, a vibration in the chest, in the teeth, in the hands, and Leo gripped the bar behind him and felt it. He thought about his father. He thought about the '78 Sportster, the way it smelled, the way his father's back had felt against his 7-year-old forehead when he'd leaned in against the wind. He thought about the word home and what it had meant then, and what it had stopped meaning when his father got sick, and what it had meant in none of the places they'd put him since. He thought about Marcus Torres, 19 years old, in a Tempe apartment building, a case file alone for 2 years because he didn't want there to be a next one. He thought about the girl whose name he'd never gotten. He thought about Hank driving east on the highway and Deputy Briggs driving back to Tucson with something to answer for, and the way Sully had said you did good to a 19-year-old on a phone and made it sound like a verdict that mattered. Sully turned his head slightly. Ready. Leo took one breath. He looked back at the garage, the broken roof, the cracked window, the concrete floor where he'd scratched 26 lines into the wall and read his father's first aid book until the pages were soft, and told himself every morning that he was still here. He was still here. Yeah, Leo said, let's go. The formation moved. 247 bikes pulled onto the highway heading west toward Phoenix, and if anyone on that stretch of Arizona road saw them coming, they would have moved over without being asked. Not out of fear exactly, out of the instinctive recognition that some things, when they are moving together with that kind of certainty, are better respected than interrupted. Leo didn't look back at the garage again. He was done counting. The Phoenix clubhouse was not what Leo expected. He didn't know exactly what he'd expected, something out of a movie maybe. Dark, chaotic, the kind of place that made you feel like you'd made a wrong turn. What he got instead was a converted warehouse on the east side of the city that smelled like machine oil and coffee, and the specific kind of order that comes from a large number of people who take their work seriously. The garage bays alone were bigger than any shop his father had ever worked in, and they were clean tools hung in their proper places. Floors swept 3 bikes in various states of restoration, sitting on lifts with the precision of surgical patients. Leo stood in the middle of it and felt something in him go very quiet. Not afraid quiet, the other kind, the kind that happens when something fits. You can close your mouth, said a voice behind him. He turned. The man was in his 60s, compact and wiry, with grease-stained hands and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He was looking at Leo the way mechanics look at each other, a specific kind of professional appraisal that had nothing to do with size or age or anything except whether you knew what you were doing. I'm Danny, the man said. I run the shop. Leo, I know who you are. Danny looked past him at the lifts. Sully told me what you did with that petcock valve, the brass fitting from a lawnmower carb. He made a sound that wasn't quite approval and wasn't quite skepticism, something in between the sound of a standard being applied. That'll hold about 200 miles if the seal's clean. I cleaned this seat before I seated it, Leo said. Danny looked at him, then nodded. One small decisive nod. Okay. That was it. That was the whole audition. Leo understood in that moment that he had just passed something, and Sully appeared at his shoulder. Danny will show you where you're sleeping tonight. Tomorrow we figure out the rest. He paused. Marcus Torres is coming at 9. I need you there for that conversation. I'll be there, Leo said. Eat something else first. You look like you're about to fall over. I'm fine. Leo. I'm fine, Sully. Sully looked at him for a moment with those pale, level eyes. Being fine and being okay are 2 different things, he said. You can be fine. You're allowed to not be okay. Leo didn't have an answer for that. It was too precise. It landed in a place he wasn't ready to look at directly, so he looked at the floor instead, and Sully didn't push it. He just put that brief 2-second hand on Leo's shoulder again, and then moved away to deal with the 100 other things that needed dealing with when 247 men arrived somewhere. Danny showed him a room. Small, clean a cot and a lamp and a hook on the wall. Leo set his backpack down and sat on the edge of the cot and looked at the wall and breathed. Just breathed. He counted the breaths instead of counting to 10 because there was no specific crisis to survive at this exact moment, just the enormous accumulated weight of a day that had started with 4 water bottles and a garage floor and was ending here in a room with a real bed in a city with people who knew his name. He thought about calling someone, then remembered there was no one to call. That thought was an old one. It had less edge than it used to. He took a shower, the first real shower in 26 days, and stood under the water for a long time and let it be what it was. At 8:50, he was in the main room of the clubhouse, sitting at a long table with Sully and 2 other men he'd been introduced to as Reyes and a man called Bishop, who was older than anyone else Leo had met today, with white hair pulled back in the careful, deliberate manner of someone who chose every word before spending it. Bishop, someone had mentioned quietly, was the club's attorney. At 9:02, there was a knock at the door. Marcus Torres was smaller than Leo had imagined from his voice. He was 19 but looked 17, lean and neat, in a dark jacket with careful eyes that moved across the room in a quick, practiced inventory, exits, faces, distances, the way the eyes of someone who has been hurt in enclosed spaces always move. He was carrying a backpack and a laptop bag, and when he saw Leo, he stopped walking for just a second. They looked at each other across the room. Two kids who'd survived the same thing. Neither of them said that out loud. They didn't need to. It was just there in the air between them, recognized and acknowledged, and then set aside because there was work to do. "Marcus," Sully said, "sit down." Marcus sat. He opened his laptop bag and put a hard drive on the table, then a folder thick with printed pages, then a smaller envelope that he placed on top of the folder and didn't open yet. "Start from the beginning," Sully said. Marcus started from the beginning. He was 16 when Hank Dawson's house stopped being survivable. He'd left the same way Leo had, running, no plan, just the pure animal decision that whatever was outside was better than what was inside. He'd made it to Phoenix on a Greyhound with $40 and the clothes he was wearing. He'd slept in a shelter for a month, gotten a job at a copy shop, enrolled himself in community college because it was the only way he knew to move forward when everything else had stopped. And then 8 months ago, he'd seen Hank's name in a news brief, a small item in the local paper. 3 paragraphs about a state review of foster care placements in Pima County. Hank hadn't been named, but the address had been there in the public record, and Marcus had recognized it like you recognize the face of something that hurt you. He'd started building the case that night. The recording, Bishop said. He'd been writing notes in a precise small hand since Marcus started talking. "Walk me through how you obtained it." Hank uses a VoIP line for his communications with the state agency, Marcus said. "It's a consumer service, not encrypted. I'm not going to go into the technical details of how I accessed it." He looked at Bishop directly. "I know how that sounds." "It sounds like something we need to discuss carefully," Bishop said with the measured neutrality of a man who has heard worse and is already thinking 3 moves ahead. "The recording is 17 minutes long," Marcus said. "The first 4 minutes are Hank and his caseworker discussing Leo's disappearance. The next 13 minutes are Hank and Deputy Briggs." He paused. At the 11-minute mark, Briggs says, and I'm quoting exactly, he says, "If the Gallagher kid files anything, I can lose it before it gets to the supervisor." He paused again. And then Hank says, "Good, he's got nobody. The system's not going to fall apart over a nobody." The room was very quiet. Leo was looking at the table. His hands were flat on it, very still. He was aware of Sully beside him and the particular quality of Sully's stillness, which was different from ordinary stillness. It was the stillness of something under significant pressure that is holding its shape by choice. "Leo," Marcus said. Leo looked up. "I started the recording 8 months ago because of you," Marcus said. "Because I found out there was a new kid in that house and He stopped. "I didn't know your name yet. I just knew there was a next one and I'd promised myself there wouldn't be." His jaw tightened. "I'm sorry it took 8 months. "You were 19, Leo said. That's not an excuse." "Marcus." Leo's voice was quiet and absolutely certain. "You were a 19-year-old kid who survived something that would have broken most people, and then you spent a year of your life building a case for a stranger you'd never met because you didn't want anyone else to go through what you went through." He paused. "Don't apologize to me. Don't ever apologize for that." Marcus looked at him. Something moved across his face, that same hairline fracture in the surface, the wire showing what it was made of, and then he pressed it back and nodded. Bishop cleared his throat gently. "The recording has evidentiary complications, but it's not necessarily inadmissible. It depends on how we frame its introduction and whether we can corroborate the content through independent sources." He looked at Marcus. "The medical records and the financial documentation are clean, all pulled from public record or from the agency's own database through a FOIA request I filed 6 months ago," Marcus said. "Everything in the folder is completely legal." Bishop picked up the folder. He opened it and began to read, and the room adjusted around his reading. Conversations dropping attention, shifting the collective understanding, that the man who knew what things were worth was now calculating. 3 minutes passed. Then Bishop looked up. He looked at Sully. "This is enough," he said. 3 words. But the weight they carried filled the room. "Enough for what?" Leo asked. "Enough for a state investigation. Enough for Briggs to be suspended pending review. Enough for Hank Dawson to lose his license as a foster care provider and face criminal charges on at minimum 3 counts. Bishop paused. "And if the recording is admitted, which I believe I can argue for enough for a federal civil rights filing on behalf of every minor in Hank's care over the past 7 years. Silence. Leo heard it land. He heard it the way you hear a door being unlocked from the outside, the specific, irreversible click of a thing being opened that has been closed for a very long time. Then Sully said, "How long does that process take?" "Filing the state complaint, I can have it in tomorrow morning. Briggs's department will have it by noon. Hank will have a notice of review by end of week." Bishop's voice was methodical and unstoppable, like a train that has calculated its own arrival time to the second. "The federal filing takes longer, months. But once the state complaint is live and the media has it—" "The Arizona Republic," Sully said. "You have a contact, Dan Hirsch. He's been sitting on a foster care abuse angle for 8 months waiting for documentation." Something shifted in Marcus's face. "Dan Hirsch. He called me 5 months ago. I didn't know if I could trust it yet." "You can trust Dan," Sully said. "He's made careers out of stories like this. More importantly, he's made changes." He looked at Marcus. "Would you be willing to talk to him?" Marcus was quiet. The whole room waited. This was not a small thing being asked. This was a 19-year-old being asked to put his name and his face on a story that would follow him for the rest of his life, to trade the privacy of his survival for the possibility of someone else's. "Yeah," Marcus said. "Yeah, I'll talk to him." That was the moment Leo understood what courage actually looked like. Not the big dramatic kind, not running from Hank's house or fixing a stranger's bike in a desert. The quiet kind. The kind that says yes to something terrifying in a room full of people with a steady voice because it's the right thing. He wanted to say something. He didn't have the words yet, so he just looked at Marcus and Marcus nodded back, and it was enough. Then Sully's phone rang. He looked at the screen. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture, a slight increase in attention, the way a man looks when the call he's been half expecting arrives earlier than planned. He answered it, put it to his ear, said nothing for 15 seconds, just listened, then said, "When?" Another pause. "How many?" Another pause. "Okay, don't do anything. I'm on my way." He stood up. "What is it?" Reyes asked. "Hank didn't go home," Sully said. The room went cold. "He drove east for about 10 miles, pulled off the highway, and made 3 phone calls," Sully said. "One to a lawyer, one to his caseworker, and one to someone we don't have identified yet." He paused. "Then he drove back west." "He's coming back," Leo said. "He's already here," Sully said. "Parked 2 blocks from this address." The silence that followed was a different kind of silence than any that had come before it. Want the heavy silence of a revelation, or the quiet silence of 2 people understanding each other? This was the sharp electric silence of a room full of people recalibrating for a threat. Leo stood up. "He followed us," Leo said. His voice was flat. "He followed the formation." "He knew where we were heading," Sully said. "He knows this address." Leo felt something he hadn't felt since he stopped running, the old, cold clarity of immediate danger, the thing that sharpened his edges and silenced everything else. He looked at Sully. "He called someone. You said 3 calls and 1 you don't have identified." "Yes." "Who does he call when he needs things to disappear?" Leo said. "Not Briggs. Briggs is done, he knows that." "Who else?" Marcus's voice came from across the table, very quiet. "There's a name in the financial records. A county supervisor named Gerald Fitch. Hank made payments to an LLC associated with Fitch's family for the last 4 years." He paused. "I didn't flag it because I couldn't prove a direct connection to the abuse. I thought it was just graft, just money." "It's not just money," Bishop said, and he was already reaching for his own phone. Sully looked at the room, at Leo, at Marcus, at Bishop and Reyes, and the 8 other men who had filtered in during the conversation, standing along the walls with the patient readiness of people who have been in difficult rooms before. He made a decision. Leo could see it happen, could see the moment the calculation completed. Bishop, call Hirsch, right now, tonight. He needs to know about Fitch before Fitch knows we know. Bishop was already dialing. Reyes, I need 6 men outside, quiet, no confrontation. I want to know everything Hank does and everyone he talks to. Reyes was already moving. Then Sully looked at Leo. You okay, third time today? Same question. Stop asking me that, Leo said, but there was no heat in it. When you stop needing me to ask, Sully said, I'll stop asking. Leo looked at him. What do you need me to do? Sully picked up his jacket. I need you to sit with Marcus and write down everything you remember. Every incident, every date you can pin down, every name Hank ever mentioned. Everything. If Bishop is filing tomorrow morning, I want your testimony in his hand by midnight. That's 3 hours. Can you do it? Leo thought about 26 days on a concrete floor. He thought about a belt and a locked door and the night he ran. He thought about all the things he'd spent 3 years pressing down into a space so small they barely took up room, and the amount of energy it had cost him every single day to keep them there compressed and silent and contained. He thought about what it would feel like to open that space, to let those things be their actual size, to stop carrying them folded up. Yeah, he said, I can do it. Marcus pulled out a legal pad from his bag without being asked, set it on the table, uncapped a pen and held it out to Leo. Leo sat down. He picked up the pen. He started at the beginning, not the beginning of the garage, not the night he ran, but further back. The beginning when a caseworker had driven him to a house in Tucson and introduced him to a heavy-set man in a Carhartt jacket who had shaken his hand in front of the caseworker with a grip that was too hard to be accidental. And Leo had understood in that handshake with the clarity of a 14-year-old who had already survived the worst thing he thought could happen to him, that something was wrong. He wrote it all down, every date he could remember, every name, every closed door and raised voice and mourning that started with dread and ended with something worse. He wrote it down in a room full of people who had decided he was worth the trouble. And outside, 2 blocks away, Hank Dawson sat in a black truck, not knowing that the system he had counted on for 7 years to protect him was being dismantled piece by piece in the time it takes a man to write the truth. And somewhere across Phoenix, a journalist named Dan Hirsch answered his phone, listened for 30 seconds, and said, Send me everything. I'll hold the morning edition. Leo didn't know that yet. Leo finished writing at 11:47, 13 minutes to midnight. His hand was cramping and his eyes were burning, and the legal pad in front of him had 9 pages of small, dense handwriting that represented 3 years of a life he had never once told anyone the full truth of. He set the pen down. He looked at what he had written for a long moment without reading it, just looking at the shape of it, the pages of it, the sheer physical fact that it existed now outside of him, that it was no longer only his to carry. Marcus was asleep in the chair beside him, head tipped back, the careful precision of his waking self completely dissolved. He looked young when he slept. He looked like what he was, a 19-year-old who had been running on adrenaline and purpose for 8 months and had finally, in the presence of people who knew what he knew, run out of fuel. Leo looked at him for a moment, thought about the girl, the one without a name, the one who had come before Marcus and left no record that Leo had ever been able to find. He had written her into his testimony as best he could. The caseworkers slipped the shutdown question, the fact of her existence, even without her name. Bishop had said it mattered. Even the absence of a record was itself a record if you knew how to read it. He gathered the pages and took them to Bishop's room and slid them under the door the way Bishop had asked. Then he walked back through the main room past the men who were still awake and talking in low voices, past the garage bays where the 3 bikes sat on their lifts in the half-dark, and he stopped at the door to the garage and stood there and looked at his father's work. Not his father's literal work, but the same work, the same language, the same conversation between a man and a machine that says, I will take you apart and I will put you back together and you will run. He put his hand on the frame of the nearest bike and felt the cold metal under his palm. Can't sleep. He turned. Danny was behind him, 2 mugs of coffee in his hands, offering one without making it a question. Leo took it. They stood side by side in the doorway of the garage and didn't talk for a while, which was its own kind of conversation. Sully told me about your dad, Danny said eventually. What did he say? Said he was a good mechanic who raised a better one. Danny sipped his coffee. High praise from Sully. He doesn't say things he doesn't mean. I know, Leo said. He'd figured that out about Sully within the first 10 minutes. "What are you going to do?" Danny asked. Not the way adults usually asked it, not the loaded version, the one that means you're a problem that needs a solution. Just honest curiosity, man to man. "I don't know yet," Leo said. "That's the first time I've said that in a while and not been scared of it." Danny nodded like that made sense to him. Fear and not knowing are two different things. Most people confuse them. "My dad used to say something like that." "Smart man." "The smartest I ever knew," Leo said. "Until maybe today." He didn't say Sully's name. He didn't need to. Danny made a sound that was the closest thing to a laugh Leo had heard from him, which wasn't very close to a laugh at all, but was warm in its own compressed way. Then outside a car door, both of them went still. Then Rhea's voice from the front of the building. "Sully, he's moving." Leo was already turning. Sully came out of the back hallway with his jacket on, fully alert, the way some men are alert, like they never completely stop being awake. Like sleep for them was just another gear, and they shifted out of it in real time. He looked at Reyes. "Which direction?" He circled the block twice. Now he's parked on the north side. Reyes's voice was level. "He made a call about 20 minutes ago. Lasted 4 minutes. Fitch, Bishop's voice from the hallway. He'd appeared without Leo, hearing him, file folder already in hand, reading, glasses on. "Can't confirm," Reyes said, but Hank got out of the truck. The room tightened. "He's on foot," Sully said. 2 blocks north, walking toward us." Leo looked at Sully. Sully looked at the door. His jaw was set, and his eyes were doing the calculation that Leo was beginning to recognize as the things Sully did. Instead of panicking, instead of anyone panicking in his presence, that slow, complete accounting of variables that came out the other side as a decision. "Bishop," Sully said, "already sending." Bishop said, phone in hand. "State complaint is going now. Tonight, not tomorrow morning." He looked up. "It'll hit the system in 11 minutes. Hirsch has been on it for 2 hours. The Fitch angle broke 20 minutes ago. He found a public record connection I hadn't seen yet. He's running it. When does it publish?" "The digital edition goes live at midnight." Bishop paused. 8 minutes. The number sat in the room. 8 minutes. Hank Dawson was 2 blocks away and walking with whatever he'd arranged in 4 minutes on a phone, and the story that would end him was 8 minutes from being public. And there was nothing in those 8 minutes except the distance between what was still possible and what was already done. "Keep everyone inside," Sully said. "Nobody goes out." "Sully," Reyes started. "I said nobody." His voice left no room. "This is not a confrontation. He's got nothing. In 8 minutes, he has less than nothing. The worst thing we can do right now is give him a reason to make this into something it doesn't need to be." He looked at the room. "Everyone understand me?" Nods. Silence. Leo looked at the door and felt the old adrenaline, the runner hold your ground kind, move through him and settle, because Sully was right. He knew Sully was right. Hank's power had always lived in the space between what he did and what anyone could prove, and that space was 7 minutes from closing forever. And the correct move was to stand completely still and let 7 minutes pass. He'd waited 26 days in a desert garage. He could wait 7 minutes. 6. 5. A knock on the door. Not aggressive, deliberate. The knock of a man who has decided on a strategy and is committing to it. Nobody moved. Another knock. "Sullivan, I know you're in there. I want to talk." Sully looked at Reyes. Reyes shook his head slightly. One man, no backup visible. Sully walked to the door. "What do you want, Hank?" Hank's voice through the door had found a new register, not the aggressive certainty from the garage, not the shrinking recalculation from the parking lot. Something different. Controlled. Prepared. The voice of a man who'd had several hours to think and had decided on a play. "I want to resolve this quietly. I think we both know that's better for everyone involved." "Do we?" Sully said. "I've spoken with a county official who has an interest in keeping certain things from becoming public. I think if we talk, just talk, we can find a number that makes this go away." The room absorbed that. Leo looked at Marcus, who had woken up at the first knock and was now sitting very straight in his chair and with his eyes completely clear. Sleep gone in an instant, the wire back under tension. "He's trying to buy it," Marcus said quietly. Not surprised, just naming it. "He's scared," Leo said. He's been scared since the highway, Sully said, still at the door. Then louder, Hank, I'm going to ask you one question and I want you to think about it before you answer. A pause. Go ahead. What time is it? Silence on the other side of the door. What? Hank said. Sully looked at his watch. Leo looked at Bishop, who was looking at his phone, and then Bishop looked up, and the particular quality of his expression, the measured, undemonstrative face of a man who has spent 40 years controlling his reactions in high-stakes rooms, cracked open very slightly into something that was unmistakably satisfaction. It's midnight, Bishop said. He turned his phone around. The Arizona Republic Digital Edition, published 40 seconds ago. The headline read, 7 years, 7 children, how one foster father and a corrupt deputy failed the system and who helped them do it. Under it, in smaller text, County Supervisor Gerald Fitch linked to payments. Full documentation inside. Marcus made a sound. Short, involuntary, the sound you make when something you've been waiting 2 years for actually arrives and you find out that waiting was worth it. Leo didn't make a sound. He just looked at the headline and felt something in him go very, very still. Not the afraid still. The other kind. The kind that comes after. The kind that means it's over. Sully turned back to the door. Hank, I suggest you call your lawyer, not the county official, your actual lawyer. A pause. And then I suggest you go home because there's nothing here that a conversation is going to fix. Silence from outside. Long silence. Then the sound of boots on concrete. Retreating, slower than they'd arrived, a car door, an engine starting, pulling away. The room held its breath for another 5 seconds after the sound faded. Then it breathed. Someone said, yeah, very quietly from the back of the room, and someone else laughed once, and Reyes put his phone in his pocket, and Marcus sat forward and put both hands over his face and stayed that way for a long time. Not crying, just staying, just letting the moment be what it was. Leo looked at the headline on Bishop's phone until the words stopped arranging themselves into meaning and became just shapes on a screen, and then he looked up and found Sully already looking at him. It's not finished, Sully said. Investigation takes time. Court takes time. Fitch is going to lawyer up before sunrise. Hank is going to fight it. I know, Leo said. It's going to ask a lot of you. Your testimony, your name publicly eventually. I know that too. You prepared for that. Leo thought about it honestly, not the brave answer, not the easy answer, but the true answer. He thought about 9 pages of handwriting and the weight of them when he handed them to Bishop, the specific lightness that came afterward, the way the thing you've been carrying feels lighter after someone else knows the shape of it. I've been carrying it alone for 3 years, Leo said. Carrying it with people sounds easier. Sully held his gaze for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, he said, it is. The next 3 days move fast and slow at the same time the way days do when they're full of real things. Bishop filed the state complaint at 12:07 and had a confirmation number by 6 in the morning. By noon, Briggs had been suspended with pay pending review, the bureaucratic version of a door being closed, which was not justice, but was the first step toward it. The Arizona Republic story had been shared 14,000 times by the time Leo woke up the first morning in the clubhouse, and by evening, a statewide foster care advocacy group had contacted Bishop's office asking to join the civil filing. Marcus gave his interview to Dan Hirsch on the second day. He sat in a coffee shop in Tempe 2 hours on record, with his name and his face, and the particular steadiness of someone who has decided that being visible is less dangerous than being silent. Leo watched the published piece go live on his phone and read every word of it twice and then a third time because there was something about seeing Marcus's name in print, Marcus Torres, 19 foster care survivor, that felt like a different kind of proof than any document in Bishop's folder. It was proof that a person had existed, that what had happened to him had happened, and the world now knew it, and the world could not unknow it. The girl without a name surfaced on the third day. Her name was Sierra Mendez. She was 22 now. She'd seen the article from her apartment in Albuquerque and called the number at the bottom of the piece Bishop's office number and left a message in a voice that Bishop described when he told Leo as very calm and very precise, the way people sound when they've been waiting a long time to say something. Leo sat with that for a while. Sierra Mendez, 22, Albuquerque, alive and precise and waiting. He wrote her name down on a piece of paper and put it in his pocket because he didn't have a reason to. He just needed it to be somewhere physical, somewhere real, somewhere he could put his hand and feel it. On the fourth morning, Sully found him in the garage before anyone else was up doing what Leo always did when he needed to think working with his hands. He'd asked Danny the night before if there was anything that needed doing on the bike in Bay 2, and Danny had said the carburetor needed a rebuild, and Leo had come in at 6 with his coffee and started. Sully watched from the doorway for a while. Then Danny says you have good hands. Danny doesn't give compliments, Leo said, not looking up. That's why it counts. Leo set down the float needle. You're going to offer me something, he said. You've been working up to it for 2 days and you've been patient about it, which means you want to do it right. Sully made the sound that was his version of impressed. You read people. My dad read engines. I read people. Same principle. He looked up. What's the offer? Sully came into the garage and leaned against the workbench with his arms crossed, and Leo waited. Danny wants to take on an apprentice. He's been asking me for 6 months, and I keep telling him the right person hasn't come along. A pause. You'd work the shop. Learn everything Danny knows, which is considerable. Room here, salary, not much, but enough. And we'd work with Bishop on an emancipation filing so the state can't touch your placement anymore. Another pause. You'd be your own legal person, 17 going on independent. Leo looked at the carburetor in his hands. He thought about his father's shop, the smell of it, the specific quality of silence that exists in a mechanic's shop early in the morning before anyone else arrives, when it's just you and the machines and the work. He thought about his father saying a good mechanic looks before he touches. He thought about a 1994 Road King with a failed petcock valve and a brass fitting from a lawnmower carb, and the moment the engine caught on the first try, and he'd felt for the first time in a long time like himself. I need to finish this carb rebuild, Leo said. I know. And I need to be part of the case, whatever Bishop needs whenever he needs it. That's not in question. And Marcus, I want to make sure Marcus has somewhere to be. He's been doing this alone for 2 years, and he's 19, and he needs, Leo stopped. He needs what I needed when you opened the garage door, someone to say he's not alone anymore. Sully was quiet for a moment. I'll talk to him today. Leo nodded. He turned the carburetor over in his hands, looked at it the way his father had taught him to look, before touching, before deciding, just looking, just listening for what the machine was trying to say. Then he set it down carefully on the workbench, the way you set down something that matters. Okay, he said. Okay, Sully said. Yeah. Leo picked up his tools. Okay. What happened after was not a fairy tale. The state investigation took 11 months. Hank Dawson's criminal trial took another 14. Gerald Fitch resigned from his county seat in the 3rd month, citing health reasons, which everyone understood to mean before the indictment comes. Deputy Aaron Briggs lost his badge and in the end testified for the state, which Bishop said was either conscience or self-preservation, and was useful either way. The civil filing on behalf of 7 children, 6 named one whose record had been deliberately purged, was settled out of court for an amount that Bishop said was adequate, and Leo privately thought was not nearly enough. But it was what the law could do, and the law was the tool they had. Sierra Mendez testified. She flew in from Albuquerque, sat in a courtroom in Tucson, in a dark blue blazer, and told the truth in the same calm, precise voice she'd used on Bishop's answering machine. When she walked out of the courtroom on the last day, she passed Leo in the hallway, and she stopped and looked at him and said simply, "Thank you for writing it down." And Leo said, "Thank you for having a name." And they stood there for a moment in a courthouse hallway in Tucson with the Arizona light coming through the windows, and understood each other completely. Marcus Torres enrolled full-time at Arizona State in the spring. He came to the clubhouse on weekends and drank coffee with Danny Mao and argued about carburetors, which Danny pretended to find annoying and clearly did not. Leo turned 18 in the garage with grease on his hands and a rebuilt engine purring on a lift, and Danny giving him a nod across the bay that contained more warmth than most people put into speeches. Sully gave him his father's old tools. Not his own, a set he'd gotten from Ray Colton's widow years ago that had lived in a box in the back of the shop because Sully had never found the right hands to put them in. Leo held them for a long time. Then he put them in their proper places, handle first on the workbench. His father never knew existed in a city. His father never visited in a life that had been built out of a desert garage and a broken petcock valve, and a man who understood that a debt is a debt, and that sometimes salvation arrives on two wheels in the middle of the afternoon and asks if you have water. He had 4 bottles. He gave them freely, and everything that mattered began right there.